Lecture 4, we will be dealing with the functions and duties of an exchange. When you look at the functions and duties of an exchange, we go back to section 10. So a licensed exchange must conduct business in a fair and transparent manner. And then in section 10.2, there is a list of what a licensed exchange must do. So can you see musts and mays? So they must provide an infrastructure. They must issue rules. They must supervise compliance. They must report non-compliance. They must assist the register in enforcing the act. They must enforce their exchange rules. They must inform the registrar of any matter that poses a risk to the market. Then if you look at G and H, may, that means they do not have to issue directives. And they do not have to amend or suspend exchange rules. So that is a nice to have, but not necessarily have to have. So A to F, must. The exchange has to do this. Still with section 10, the functions and duties of an exchange. I must make provision for clearing and settlement, may appoint an independent clearing house. So if you clear and settle yourself, that is fine, but you can appoint a clearing house to do that. They must consult with that clearing house when they changing the rules. They must, if they do not appoint a clearing house, provide that infrastructure for clearing and maintain that infrastructure. K, must supervise compliance by the issuers, must notify the registrar if it commences insolvency proceedings. So when you deal with insolvency, any interested parties, that is creditors, the registrar, for example, will be affected by those proceedings. And then M is kind of a catch-all provisions. May do all other things necessary for the proper operation of the exchange. So just in case they left something out of the list, there's the catch-all. They may do all other things necessary. So then you look at 3 and it talks about the registrar. So what must the registrar do before assuming responsibility? They must inform the exchange. They must give reasons and they must show cause. Why are they taking responsibility for that specific exchange? So if they do not comply with section 10.2, section 10.3 comes into play. When you look at the functions and duties of an exchange, you look at listing of securities. So the listing of securities is dealt with in section 11. So section 11.1 states all the requirements in which the exchange must comply. So as you look there down the list, there are all the requirements. They can be listed and removed, standards of conduct, but also if you look at G, for any contravention or failure, there are certain penalties in place, reprimands, fines, disqualification, other penalties, etc. So when listing securities, take note of section 11 of the Exchange of the Financial Markets Act. Removal and suspensions is dealt with in section 12. So the exchange may, if you do not comply with section 11, remove securities from the list. So there's procedure that needs to happen. You can't just remove it. So section 12 to A to C deals with it. They need to inform the issuer, give the reasons, and show the cause of why they are removing that specific security. With regards to new listing requirements, section 13 says that a notice needs to be given in writing to the issuer of the securities when the FMA gives new listing requirements to ensure that the issuer of the security complies with the new requirements.
Section 14 deals with disclosure of information by the issuers. In section 14.1, it says that an exchange may require an issuer to disclose any information at their disposal about the affairs of that issuer or any disclosure necessary to achieve the objects of the Act, which is referred to in Section 2. Okay, if the issuer refuses to do so, the FMA then says that you can suspend trading of securities by that issuer. Now, looking at the exchange rules, Section 17 is a very important section. So firstly, it says that the exchange rules must be consistent with the Act. So when the exchange has its own rules, like if you look at the JSE rules and directives, they need to be consistent with the Act. Then it has certain things that the exchange rules must provide for. So it talks about the criteria for an authorized user. So who can be an authorized user of an exchange? So it says that they need to be of good character and high business integrity. They also set out standards of training and expertise as well as other qualifications. You will know that if you deal with securities on the exchange, you should be a registered FSP, right? So you are a registered financial service provider. In order to be a registered FSP, you have to write certain exams and you have to have certain training, experience, and qualification. Not just that, but you need to maintain that level of training as well, which means you have to do CPD points and things like that. It talks about authorization criteria for securities. What are the criteria needed for securities? In order to list on a specific exchange, that exchange has authorization criteria. If you look at the exchanges in South Africa, for example, the JSE and the ZARX, they had a legal battle, and the legal battle was surrounding this real listing criteria. The JSC said that the ZARX would be unfair competition and therefore they should not be given an exchange license. The court, however, found that the ZARX was actually not in direct competition with the JSE at all. So they catered to two very different markets. So this shows you that an exchange can set out different criteria for listing.